is Mick McNaught, who is you are the Community Parks Officer for Derby, is that right?
I'm one of four community parks officers across the city. Yeah.
Oh wow, lucky Derby.
Lucky Derby, yes.
And you've spent quite a good few years looking at Derby Arboretum in particular because of its great historical importance. So what excites you about the Derby Arboretum?
Well, I've been working with the Arboretum now probably about 12 years, I think it is by now. It's one of those places that really grows on you actually. The more I've looked into the design of John Claudius Loudon, the more just amazed and blown away I am by just what the man knew, what the man was doing, what he achieved here, and you look into things and you go, why is this like this, and you look at why it's happened and what he's saying about it, and you just get, it's just thrilling to find out as much as you can about it. Why we've got this fantastic landscape here in Derby.
Well, so what's special about this pear tree?
Well, it's one of the original plantings on the Arboretum, so it's been here very nearly 180, well it probably has been here 180 years.
So it's the original tree?
It's an original planting on the Arboretum.
Wow.
So obviously he started the works in 1839 and it did take a year to complete. Obviously its opening, which will be celebrated in September, on the 16th, 17th of September.
Wow, so the park now, 180 years later, does look different to the way Loudon would have imagined it. If Loudon was walking through the park now, he'd be going, why have you let these trees get so big?
Yeah, he would say that it had been managed properly, because his expectation was, that there would be new specimens either bred, or new specimens then which would have been coming into the country that would be of interest. So there'd be a change in canopy throughout its history to reflect the new specimens to be viewed.
But as a park officer these days, with trees that are over 100 years old, there's no public appetite to take a tree down, surely?
No, there isn't, but we have. I mean, in my time here, when they did the restoration of the Arboretum with HLF funding, the first thing they did, because the Arboretum became so overpopulated, they took out 111 trees.
Wow.
And there was a hue and cry about taking out so many mature specimens. But it wasn't until after they went that people could see, there's suddenly light and views and vistas opened up, more in keeping with Loudon's original intention, which made it a much more inviting and enjoyable space. And so you've got to understand that you do need, in a park environment, to remove trees and to replant.
Well, I'm glad that the park has kept some of these trees, because I mean there is something really quite awe-inspiring of looking at a pear tree that's 50 foot. And does the pear tree produce fruit?
And I've been told that they are edible, but right. I've never fancied chewing on them because they never seem to get anything more than being little hard balls.
So that's about as big as they get?
Yeah, they never get much bigger than that.
So we're next to the white mulberries, one of the two mulberries that you've planted since the other one had to be removed. And this is obviously a much younger tree. So what's
20 years old, 15 years, yeah.
So what's the difference between a black mulberry and a white mulberry?
Well, you see a lot of black mulberries, and I think they date from about the 1500s. And the black mulberries came into the country for the silk moth larva, to feed the silk moth larva, to get the silk trade going and get us producing homegrown silk.
But they weren't producing silk in the UK.
Yes, silk was produced in the UK.
Wow,
but the problem is that I don't know if somebody duped them where they were getting them from, in China or whatever else. But the black mulberry wasn't actually the tree species to feed the larvae.
Oh.
It was the white mulberry that they needed. So we got a lot of black mulberries coming into the country erroneously.
Oh, so literally they had all these black mulberry trees and they couldn't produce the silk?
Yeah, originally. That's why they came over those.
I mean, it certainly kind of feels for me kind of a metaphor for the park. It's the first urban park in the industrialised world, so to speak, and that was initially based on the industrialisation of producing silk.
Yeah.
So it's fitting that you've got some silk trees, I suppose, in the Derby Arboretum.
Well, they're incredibly beautiful trees, and as somebody's also pointed out, the black mulberry, the fruiting on it is delicious.
And
makes a very nice wine.
Oh, that's and we should produce an Arboretum wine then from.
I always wanted to make mulberry wine myself. I can never get to them before other people had picked them before they'd ripened properly.
I see. And that's going to get worse now that everybody now knows that you can eat the fruit off these trees. And can you eat the white mulberry?
I'm presuming so, yeah. I've never actually tried it. I've never actually seen a white mulberry with fruit on it so far. So,
well, the key thing is the black mulberry makes delicious wine, so that's that's the thing to bear in mind. Oh, well, thank you very much.
Okay.
We are below another original tree, so another tree that's been here 180 years, which I understand is the black walnut. So
It is indeed.
what's so special about this one?
It's strange, I mean, over the years, you sort of, and I've given numerous talks and guided tours around here, and there's certain trees you end up saying, well, this is my favourite tree. And it is a seasonal thing, it does change depending on what the tree's doing at the time. So I must confess I've been quite fickle about that, so different trees have always been my favourite over time. But
is this one your favourite now?
yeah, it always has been, because, I mean, hopefully there'll be a shot included, which gives you a sense of there's just the sheer size, but it's just a beautifully structured tree. It's beautifully dark structured bark. But one of the things I like about trees, and again, as I was picking out a few trees to look at, I realised I'd been picking out trees with a certain feature, and that is trees that keep the verdant green, lighter foliage. And yeah, when spring comes and all the trees open their leaves, they've got this verdant greenness to it, which is shouts spring and fresh. And a lot of trees over the summer just darken and darken and darken and get darker and darker, and you lose that freshness to the leaves. But this is one of the species that actually keeps a lighter hue to its leaves, and I always think that it just always feels spring-like.
Well, this has got a fabulous large canopy. It's got a huge radius to it, and when you look up, there is this kind of very, very light green to it, so I've never really thought about it. And the way the leaves are, you can actually feel the light come through this one as well, despite the kind of sheer enormity of this one. And then the black walnut has got its name for a reason.
Yeah, the husks they produce are very black dark. As I was saying to you earlier, I did mistakenly leave some black walnuts in a bag, which I'd taken it with the intention of planting them. I left them under my desk for some months longer than I ought to have done, and when I picked the bag up, there was this huge puddle of black dye on the floor, which was permanently stained the floor. And
so the moral of the story is, don't leave black walnuts under the desk in your office.
No, do not do that. Just plant them and grow, which they do, because we did after that. We did plant them, so it just produced viable seed, which is really.
So this is one of my favourite trees, and the reason this is one of my favourite is because of this really unusual line here. So it's fascinated me several times when I've come into the park, but you know why that is.
Well, I think I know. I'll say this might encourage a bit of healthy debate, so I might be entirely wrong. But when I came on site, I was always fascinated as to why this graft line existed this high off the ground.
And that's what it is, a graft line.
That's what I believe it is. Yeah, it's a graft line, and it would be common for trees to be grafted and other plants to be grafted much further down on a more vigorous rootstock. And the reason growers did that is because they could get more specimens of a specific variety out of a greater financial value. If you've got a specimen tree, you could get more specimen trees out into production more quickly. But like I say, normally you'd expect a much, much lower graft line for that, because you're just using the rootstock to give vigour to the grafted stock on top. But looking at this, I scratched my head. I did ask a few people if they had any idea why this line was, why the graft was up here, and I didn't really get an answer. So the only answer I can think of, I had an epiphany one day, and that this was originally planted as a standard.
Right.
Where the rootstock has been grown to yay high, because the graft line don't really changes. And the graft line is pretty much where the graft line is on the original rootstock, and onto that they've grafted this very splendid silver pendant line. Apart from that line, if you could rub that line out, there'd be nothing to indicate that this wasn't just a normal fully formed tree. So it's just incredible, but it looks perfectly normal when it's entirely not.
Well, it just feels like it's been cut off and then just put back on again.
Well, it was,
mistake.
But very early in its life.
And the silver pendant lime is a really beautiful tree as well, because unlike the black walnut, it has the canopy, but it sort of drops off down the side, doesn't it? So it has this kind of draping effect, which makes it really beautiful to sit under.
Yeah, like I said, cascading waterfall of green leaves coming down. It's a beautiful tree.
It's a really, really beautiful tree. Yeah, no, it's lovely. And now I know why it's got that ridge in it.
Well, now we think we know.
We think we know. So, so if anybody
answers
knows,
on a postcard. Anybody who knows better.
Fantastic, wonderful. Thank you very much. So, Mick, you've called this one a cucumber tree. Why is it called a cucumber? Does it produce cucumbers?
No, it is a magnolia, but the fruiting bodies on it in their early stages look like very small cucumbers, so hence the name. But
I had no idea that there was a magnolia in the park, and I haven't really noticed this one, despite the fact of how distinct it is. I mean, it's got this slope all the way up, and it's huge canopy, but it's sort of invisible if you're kind of walking around in a way.
Again, it is, like I say, an original planting. This was on Loudon's original catalogue. This was tree number 1. He numbered all the trees going around the Arboretum, and as we stand here, there is a small area behind us where we have planted up other magnolias, so we are slowly returning this back to the collection of the family groups of magnolias. So this is a Magnolia cuminata, but we've got Magnolia cobus, Magnolia denudata, which is also known as the Ylang lily tree, and we've got a form of Magnolia galaxy, and we've also got a couple of evergreen magnolias, the Magnolia grandifloras, or southern magnolia, I think it's also commonly known as.
Quite a few of them in the park, but I love that it's number 1. It's like the address number 1 London. This is number 1 Arboretum.
This is number 1 Arboretum Park. Address your letters here. And it's just splendid. It's always, I'm always mindful of the fact that, one day, I hope I don't see it, the trees like this, we're going to lose them, and you don't want to lose, the original planting, but it's an inevitability, and I think it'll be a very sad day when we do.
Well, it does look like a very special tree, and I need to spend a bit more time with this one, I think, now that I know it's here. But I've not seen it flower. Does it flower?
Well, strange enough, yes it does. And actually, I, like you, an initial visit, those time spent on here, I'd never seen it flower, and I sort of assumed that it's that old, it's stopped bothering or something like that, but trees are like that, they bother. The problem that you've got is most people used to seeing magnolias in a much smaller form, where you can see from sort of the side or above the canopy, so you get to see the flowers. Now, if you were a bird in June, you would get a glorious view of all of the flowers on this magnolia tree.
Oh, to be a bird.
Yes, and I do want somehow to get some shots, aerial shots of it in flower one day, hopefully, because it will be glorious. From the air, this tree will be glorious when it's in full flower, but you only get mere glimpses of it around the edges on the lower flowers. If you're looking at the right time of year, you can see the odd flower lower down. But,
and magnolia flowers, they're quite big, aren't they?
Well, depending on specimen, they vary in size, but I mean, the grandifloras named, they have very big saucer size flowers with rich lemon scent. Most of the magnolias are quite strong scented flowers if you get close enough to smell them. But this is a sort of a mid-sized flower, I'd say. It's not
you couldn't get close enough to smell the
flowers. You would struggle, unfortunately.
But it's quite incredible that Loudon had this idea that there would be these kind of cute, smallish specimen trees that would be replaced regularly.
Yeah.
And now, paradoxically, we have some of the largest specimens, examples of these specimens in the country. So in June, everyone should come to number 1 Arboretum and look out for the magnolia flowers.
And bring a very tall ladder or some sort of platform to get a good view of it.
Or look up, as you're encouraging people to do.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. Well, I will certainly be booking a spot here in June next year. Lovely. Thank you so much. So, Mick, this magnificent specimen says on it that it's a false acacia.
Yes. Again, we stopped by this one. It's again one of the original plantings from the start of the Arboretum. But I suppose it's also quite important to me. Again, it's one of the Robinias is one of the trees that keeps a slightly lighter foliage throughout the whole of the season rather than. But also in terms of the general design, because as we've been going round, people may or may not have noticed the mounds and things that are going on around here. And so it's important to understand some of that from the perspective of Loudon's design for the site. So when he came here, it was very flat, very level. It's quite a small site, it's only 11 acres.
we're quite high up at the moment,
Yes.
aren't we? We're on one of those
Yes,
mounds,
yes.
and the tree itself is a very tall tree.
On the top of that mound.
Yes, so it's like a skyscraper almost, isn't it? Because also like you were saying about the canopy as well, this has got very light green leaves, but the canopy's right up at the top, and it's quite narrow, isn't it?
Yes.
So it's got a very different feel to it to the other trees. But as you say, it's on one of these mounds,
Yes.
so it's quite intimidating.
Yes, but it's also on a mound for a very good reason. So I'll read you a small extract about Loudon's, and it's quite, when you read this for the first time, there's a reason for the mounds, not just, so the mounds have two uses. One is to give a sense of seclusion, so if you're on one path you're not seeing all the people on the other. But on reading this, I mean, it's evident that some of the mounds would have slumped over time, but they were originally built and designed to be 7 to 10 feet tall. Some of them in some places they will be, but in other places they're definitely not 7 to 10 feet tall.
That worries me a bit, but can they support a tree as
Yeah,
big as this over
because
time?
it's all grown and settled together, so it'll be absolutely fine. And the roots on a tree, and we'll get on to talk about the roots of a tree. But I'll just read you, because that's exactly what we're talking about in this bit from Loudon. It says, so he's referring back to where he's described all the wonderful things there are about trees to be seen. And he says, in addition to these sources of interest, there is a very great beauty in trees which, from the improper planting of artificial plantations, is often overlooked, or rather concealed, and that is the ramification of the main surface roots at the point where they join the trunk. In general, trees are planted so deep that this ramification never appears above the surface, and the trunk of the tree seems fixed in the ground like a post which has been driven into it. An appearance that is as contrary to truth and nature, and is also, as it is also to the health of the tree, as the shaft of a column without a base or capital would be if employed in a building. To architectural text, so saying, you've got a column, you'll have a base and a capital, so we know what we should have. So why would you do other with a tree? Why would you just have a column and a capital? You'd look robbed without this base. So then he says, to prevent, this is the thing that struck me, and this is harsh words for the times of his writing, to prevent this monstrous and unnatural appearance from occurring in the Derby Arboretum, I have directed all the trees to be planted on little hills, the width of the base being 3 times the height of the hill, so that the junction of the main roots with the base of the trunk will appear above the ground. So, yes, the mounds were here to give a sense of seclusion from path to path to path, so that people couldn't see each other, so if people were isolated, you wouldn't be able to see the boundaries of the park, so it would feel bigger than it actually was. But also, I always like to think he's like full-size bonsai, where you see people grow bonsai trees over rocks, so you see all the roots and they look glorious. In a way, he's trying to plant these in a way which display the roots, so you get a sense of the third of the tree, which is anchored, these beer moss, into the ground that most people are just oblivious to.
It's like another metaphor for the first urban park that is actually taking his inspiration from buildings and back to nature. So I'm imagining all these like Doric and Corinthian columns where you have this beautiful flourish at the top.
Yeah.
But he's saying, you can work your way up, but then the base is just as important.
Yeah, you need to start from the base. And again, if you think walking along the paths, your eye will be directed to the root structure, to the buttressing of the roots, and then work your way up the trees you were supposed to do. Yeah.
I have to say though, I mean, when you take the odd picture of the Arboretum and you have the winding paths and you have those lamps, it does have a New York feel to it. I have to say, I don't know if that's my imagination, but
New York has an Arboretum feel.
Yes.
You've got to get this the right way round.
Get it the right way round. We were first.
Absolutely.
But this is, this is a really stunning tree, and this is one of the originals as well, and an international tree.
Well, it's certainly a champion tree.
What does a champion tree mean?
Well, it's one of the largest recorded in the UK. It's not the very
I see what you mean.
It's a champion tree in the UK.
Yeah. So. But again, another really interesting trunk pattern as well. And I didn't realise until we were walking around the park how different they are from one another. Like you say, plenty to look at.
People
level.
go round and do bark ruins.
Oh really?
Yeah.
So it's like a craft.
You've not heard of that?
No, I haven't.
Yeah. Getting a piece of paper and a piece of charcoal and rubbing over and getting the whole texture of tree bark.
And sending the pattern off and then making it a wallpaper.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Oh, that's lovely. Thank you.